There's a strange kind of prison that doesn't have walls, bars, or guards. It's built from notifications, expectations, and the constant demand to respond. It's the prison of being too accessible. Every message you answer the moment it arrives. Every yes you say when your soul whispers no. Every time you keep yourself open to others at the cost of closing yourself. You give away a little piece of freedom. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." But how can we look inside when the world keeps knocking on our door, when we've trained ourselves to always answer? We've mistaken constant availability for kindness. We've confused being reachable with being valuable. And slowly, without realizing it, we lose the boundary between who we are and who everyone else wants us to be. The truth is, you don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself in small moments of saying yes when you mean no, in the habit of checking your phone before checking your mind, in the comfort of always being needed. Until one day, you forget what it feels like to be alone. And okay. This is not a message about isolation. It's a message about reclamation. Because freedom doesn't begin when you escape others. It begins when you no longer feel the need to be constantly available to them. It begins when you realize that your energy is sacred and that not everyone deserves a seat at your table. This is not selfishness. It's self-respect. It's the quiet rebellion of choosing inner peace over social performance. Let's explore this deeper, through Jung's lens of psychology and spirit. Because to stop being accessible to everyone is not to shut the world out, but to finally let yourself in. Carl Jung observed that the modern person often feels empty, not because the world lacks meaning, but because the individual has been absorbed by the collective. We become extensions of everyone else's desires, opinions, and projections. Our inner world, the self, gets buried under the noise of belonging. And in our time, accessibility has become the new currency of validation. We are told that being constantly reachable means being reliable. That availability equals worth. But Jung would have called this a dangerous illusion, a shadow disguised as virtue. We live in what he described as the collective consciousness, a vast network of shared expectations that keeps us tethered to others' needs. But when your phone buzzes every minute, when your attention is scattered between 10 conversations, when your silence is constantly interrupted, you are no longer living in the fullness of your own psyche. You are living through others' demands. The mind starts to fragment. You become restless when you're not needed, anxious when you're not online, and guilty when you're not responding. It's as if your very existence depends on others' acknowledgement of it. If this content resonates with you, hit the like and subscribe button. We really appreciate your support. Jung warned about this fragmentation. He said that when we fail to develop a relationship with our own unconscious, we become slaves to the external world. The self, the deeper, authentic center, loses its voice beneath the crowd. You begin to notice it subtly. You laugh because others laugh. You agree before you reflect. You participate before you pause. And soon, you can't tell whether your actions are truly yours or borrowed. In this way, accessibility becomes a form of possession, not in a mystical sense, but psychological. The more people pull on your energy, the less you belong to yourself. Freedom starts with recognizing this invisible theft. Every time you answer instantly, you train others to believe that your time is not yours. Every time you postpone your solitude, you reinforce the idea that you must be on call to be loved. But in Jungian thought, the path toward wholeness begins in withdrawal, not from life, but from the illusion of needing to belong to everyone. To individuate, to become who you truly are, you must first step away from the noise long enough to hear your own voice again. The moment you reclaim your time, your silence, your slow response, you begin to feel the power shift. You are no longer reacting to life. You are responding from within. Freedom begins there, in the pause, in the moment when you no longer rush to reply, because you've realized that your peace matters more than their urgency. As you begin to see how constant availability fragments your mind and steals your energy, a deeper truth emerges, one that lurks beneath the surface of every yes you've ever said. There is a part of you that has been quietly observing, a hidden part that grows restless when your attention is scattered, a part that whispers in the silence you rarely allow yourself. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious aspects of ourselves we avoid, deny, or project onto others. How being too available doesn't just drain your energy, but slowly erodes the authenticity of your soul. Because understanding the shadow is the first step toward reclaiming your inner power and discovering why freedom begins the moment you stop giving yourself to everyone. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Today, our unconscious is no longer just buried in our dreams or repressed memories. It's buried beneath the constant stream of interaction. Every ping, every scroll, every moment we check if someone has seen our message is the new ritual of losing ourselves. We think we're connected, but what we've built is an architecture of dependence on validation, attention, and the illusion of belonging. And deep within that constant accessibility lies the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. In Jung's psychology, the shadow is everything we deny about ourselves: our jealousy, our need for control, our fear of loneliness, our desire to be seen as important. When you always say yes, when you never turn off your phone, when you sacrifice your silence just to stay included, you're not being selfless. You're feeding a deeper hunger, the fear of being forgotten. That's the shadow speaking. It whispers, "If I'm not reachable, I'll be irrelevant. If I say no, they'll stop caring. If I take time alone, I'll lose connection." This voice is ancient. It's the same primal fear that once told us we'd die without the tribe. But today, that instinct has evolved into digital anxiety, the constant need to prove our presence. We've become haunted by our own availability. And what's tragic is, we mistake it for connection. The human soul was not designed for constant contact. It was designed for rhythm, presence and withdrawal, speech and silence, light and shadow. Every deep relationship, even with yourself, needs space to breathe. But when you are always available, you flatten the mystery that makes connection meaningful. Think of it. When someone knows they can reach you at any time, your presence becomes ordinary, predictable, and easy to ignore. Availability breeds invisibility. Jung said that the unlived life, the parts of us that remain unexplored, haunt us like ghosts. And one of the biggest reasons we never live fully is because we never give ourselves the space to. Your creativity, your intuition, your insight, they're born in silence. They're children of solitude. But when you fill every quiet moment with others' noise, you exile those parts of yourself to the unconscious and call it being social. This is the paradox. We stay accessible because we crave connection, but in doing so, we lose the depth that makes real connection possible. Every time you post, respond, or engage instantly, there's a subtle psychological transaction taking place. You're not just communicating, you're seeking reflection. You want to see yourself in the mirror of others' attention, but Jung would remind us, when your identity depends on others' reflection, you become trapped in projection. The moment you live for replies, likes, or approval, you are no longer living from within. You are living from the surface. And what's even more dangerous? The shadow grows stronger in silence, not the silence of solitude, but the silence that comes when validation doesn't arrive. That's when the anxiety sets in. You start wondering, did I do something wrong? Did they forget me? Am I losing my place in their life? But the truth is, nothing is wrong. You are simply facing the emptiness you've been avoiding. And that emptiness isn't your enemy. It's the doorway to your real self. Facing the Jung believed that healing begins the moment we turn inward and face the parts of ourselves we've neglected. For many of us today, that neglected part is our solitude. We've built our lives around external stimuli, forgetting that our inner world, the source of imagination, wisdom, and intuition, requires disconnection to grow. To withdraw, then, is not to reject the world. It's to realign with yourself, to tell the shadow, "I see you. I know you crave attention, but I will not feed you anymore with endless accessibility." In this withdrawal, something sacred happens. Your worth begins to untangle from your visibility. Your presence begins to regain its gravity. And your shadow, no longer repressed, starts to integrate into your consciousness, transforming from a wound into wisdom. You begin to understand that being unreachable doesn't mean being forgotten. It means being full, filled with your own essence again. That is the beginning of inner freedom, because you no longer need to be seen to exist. You simply are. When you stop being accessible to everyone, you start being available to yourself. And in that space of solitude, something ancient awakens. Next, we'll enter part 3, the solitude that awakens you, where we explore how silence, isolation, and sacred withdrawal become the soil from which freedom and individuality bloom. There comes a moment when the noise fades, when your phone no longer lights up, when your circle of people grows smaller, and at first, it feels like loss. You might feel forgotten. You might feel like you've disappeared from the rhythm of everyone's life. But this disappearance is sacred. Carl Jung believed that the journey toward wholeness, what he called individuation, can only begin when you turn your gaze inward. And to do that, you must first withdraw from the crowd, because you cannot find yourself in a world that never lets you be alone. We've been taught to fear solitude. We call it loneliness, as if being with yourself is something to escape. But solitude is not loneliness. It is presence without performance. It's the silence where you no longer need to be anyone for anyone. When Jung retreated to his small tower in Bollingen, he wasn't escaping life. He was entering it more deeply. He built that place with his own hands, without electricity, without distraction, a sacred space where he could speak with his soul. In that silence, he painted, carved, and dreamed. And from that solitude came the insights that reshaped psychology itself. We all need our own Bollingen Tower, a place, physical or mental, where the world's noise can't reach us, where our spirit can breathe again. But why do we fear it so much? Because when you are alone, the truth begins to speak. In silence, your mind can no longer hide behind distractions. Your insecurities, your regrets, your unmet desires, they all rise to the surface. This is why most people keep themselves constantly reachable, because to be reachable is to be distracted, and to be distracted is to avoid the confrontation within. But Jung taught that the soul speaks in symbols, in dreams, in feelings that don't make logical sense. To understand them, you must be still long enough to listen. When you stop being accessible to everyone else, you become accessible to that inner voice, the one that whispers not what you should be, but what you are. And that voice doesn't shout. It waits for silence. True solitude is not emptiness. It is a deepening, a falling inward. You start noticing the texture of your own thoughts, the rhythm of your breathing, the subtle beauty in doing nothing. This is the moment Jung described as the night sea journey, a descent into the inner world, where you confront your forgotten selves and hidden desires. It's not easy. There will be restlessness, boredom, even fear. But underneath all of that, there's something pure, an awareness untouched by noise. When you find that awareness, you realize that solitude is not a punishment. It's a purification. It cleanses you of false attachments. It washes away the need to prove yourself. And it reveals that peace was never something you had to find, only something you had to stop running from. Becoming Jung's path of individuation teaches that every human being must integrate both the outer and inner worlds, the social and the spiritual, the visible and the invisible. But integration is impossible without solitude, because only in solitude can you see what parts of you are truly yours and what parts you've borrowed to belong. You begin to notice the opinions that aren't yours, the ambitions that never felt right, the relationships that drain more than they give. And as you let them go, you start reclaiming fragments of yourself, pieces you left behind in people's approval, in conversations you didn't need to join, in lives you tried to fit into. Solitude is where you remember what freedom feels like. It's where you realize that peace is not found in being understood, but in understanding yourself. After enough time alone, something shifts. You start to feel whole, even when unseen. You begin to enjoy the quiet. You notice beauty in simple moments, the way sunlight touches the wall, the way your thoughts slow down when you breathe deeply. And here lies the paradox. When you stop being accessible to everyone, you become profoundly present to everything. You taste life more vividly, you listen more deeply, you feel more alive, not because the world gives you meaning, but because you do. This is the freedom Jung spoke of, the liberation that comes when the outer world no longer controls your inner one. You are no longer a reflection of the collective. You are a mirror of your own light. But solitude alone is not the destination. It's the crucible. It burns away illusion so that authenticity can emerge. The next stage, the true test, is what happens when you return to the world again. How do you hold your peace when others demand your presence? How do you keep your center when the world pulls at you again? That's where we go next, into part 4, the power of detachment, how boundaries create inner strength. When you begin to taste the calm of solitude, you'll notice something shift inside you. Suddenly, chaos feels heavier than before, small talk feels hollow, noise feels violent, and what once felt normal, constant availability, now feels like a betrayal of your peace. You've changed frequency. You've moved from reaction to reflection, from needing to respond to choosing to preserve. This is detachment, and it's not indifference, it's mastery. Carl Jung taught that one of the greatest challenges of human growth is learning to stand in the tension of opposites, between the outer world and the inner world, between belonging and being, between love and freedom. Detachment is that balance. It's the art of staying connected without being consumed. When you stop being accessible to everyone, you're not rejecting others, you're redefining how you connect. You begin to ask yourself, does this conversation add meaning or drain it? Do I truly want to share my energy, or am I just afraid of silence? Am I engaging out of love or out of habit? Every time you pause before answering, every time you choose to let a message wait, every time you step back from drama, you are practicing a form of inner alchemy. You are turning emotional reactivity into conscious choice. The first time you say no to someone who's used to your yes, you'll feel it, that sting of guilt. It's the echo of your old self dying, the self that believed being loved meant being available. But Jung reminded us that guilt is often the companion of growth. It appears not because we are doing something wrong, but because we are doing something new. When you begin setting boundaries, people who benefited from your lack of them will notice. They may call you distant. They may say you've changed. They may even make you feel selfish. But you'll know deep down, this is not selfishness. This is self-conservation. And only by conserving your energy can you offer anything real to the world. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They don't isolate you. They protect your essence. Jung believed that psychic energy, what he called libido, is the fuel of the soul. Everything you think, feel, or create draws from this energy. But when you give constant access to everyone, your psychic energy leaks. You feel drained, unfocused, fragmented. Notice how you feel after endless small interactions, half present, half empty, as though your spirit has been stretched too thin. Now notice how you feel after time alone. Your thoughts clear, your emotions calm, your intuition alive. That's your energy refilling. So, when you start limiting access, you are not withdrawing. You are refueling. Every boundary you set becomes an act of spiritual maintenance. You are saying, my energy is sacred. I will not spend it on noise. This is what detachment really means. Not coldness, but clarity. The ability to stay rooted in yourself, even when the world tries to pull you into its storms. The most powerful people in the world are not those who are everywhere, but those who are selective about where they are. Their absence has meaning, their time has weight, their no carries power because it's not said with anger, but with self-awareness. You begin to realize being unavailable is not weakness, it's refinement. If this content resonates with you, hit the like and subscribe button. We really appreciate your support. Jung might say this is when the self begins to govern the ego, rather than the other way around. You no longer seek approval. You no longer chase connection. You simply are. And those who resonate with your essence will come. You don't need to prove your worth through constant access. You become magnetic through presence, not performance. Once your emotions are no longer chained to the reactions of others, clarity emerges like sunlight through fog. You start noticing patterns. Who truly respects you? Who only contacts you when they need something? Who listens when you speak versus who waits to reply? Detachment gives you sight. It's as if you've been underwater your whole life, and now, finally, your head rises above the surface. You can breathe again. You see that love does not need constant proof. You see that silence does not mean disconnection. You see that peace doesn't require participation. Freedom begins to take shape not as rebellion, but as serenity. As you detach, the paradox unfolds. The less available you are, the more valuable your presence becomes. When you speak, people listen. When you show up, it matters. When you choose to share yourself, it's felt deeply, because you're no longer scattered, you're whole. Jung called this the integration of the self, when the fragments of your psyche align into harmony. You are no longer pulled by every external force. You move from an inner center of gravity. You realize that saying no is not rejection, it's redirection of energy, attention, and purpose. You've stopped reacting to life. You've started creating it. And now, the circle nears completion. You've seen the cost of accessibility, the necessity of solitude, and the power of detachment. But what happens next? When you have reclaimed your peace and your strength, what does it truly mean to be free? Carl Jung believed that ultimate freedom comes when a person lives from the self, a state where your inner world is no longer dictated by the outer. In the final part, we explore that transcendence, how freedom begins not in rebellion, but in silence, stillness, and self-possession. There comes a point when the noise stops, not because the world has gone quiet, but because you no longer respond to every echo. You've stopped running toward validation, stopped explaining yourself to those who don't listen, stopped offering pieces of your peace just to stay connected. You've realized something profound. Freedom is not about having no attachments. It's about having the right ones. Attachments to purpose, to presence, to your own soul. Carl Jung called this stage individuation, the process of becoming whole, of aligning the outer life with the inner truth. And it begins when you stop living as a reflection of others and start living as a revelation of yourself. There's a quiet kind of rebellion that doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove, or post, or persuade. It simply is. It's the person who no longer rushes to reply, who chooses silence over spectacle, who listens more than they speak. That kind of person carries gravity. Their peace can be felt before they say a word, because when you stop being accessible to everyone, you create space for presence to grow, and presence is the rarest form of power. The world may not understand this at first. They'll call you distant, mysterious, even cold, but in truth, you're just centered. You've stopped scattering your soul to prove you exist. You've begun inhabiting it. The reconciliation, Jung said that the self, the true center of the psyche, is like the sun. It doesn't chase anything, it radiates. And when you live from that center, you no longer need to grasp for control or attention. You simply shine, not because you're trying to, but because you can't help it. This is what freedom looks like, being so grounded in your own being that the chaos of the world no longer shakes you. It doesn't mean you isolate. It means you engage without losing yourself. You can love deeply, help generously, speak kindly, without sacrificing your center. Because you now know, you don't need to be accessible to everyone to be connected to everything. The more you root within, the more your presence touches the world in ways noise never could. When in our modern world, silence has become radical. People equate speaking with power, but real power often moves in quiet. Jung once wrote that the soul is not found by adding things, but by subtraction. Freedom is not expansion, it's refinement. The less you explain, the more your truth resonates. The less you chase, the more aligned life becomes. The less you respond to noise, the more meaningful your words become when you do speak. Silence is not emptiness. It's a presence so complete that it no longer needs validation. When you can sit in silence without fear, you have reached a rare state. You have met yourself fully. And once you meet yourself, you can never go back to being constantly reachable, because you now know what your presence is worth. The freedom, in Jung's sense, is not doing whatever you want. It's knowing what you truly want, and no longer being enslaved by the rest. It's not the freedom of movement, but the freedom of stillness. Not the freedom of expression, but the freedom of authenticity. You no longer react to every pull, because your energy is no longer scattered in 1,000 directions. You've reclaimed it. You hold it. You live from it. This is the final transformation, to be self-possessed. To be so rooted in who you are that you no longer need to convince, compare, or compete. You walk slower, you speak softer, you act from clarity, not compulsion. And in that stillness, life begins to bend toward you. The freedom is not a destination, it's a rhythm. You withdraw, to return. You detach, to connect deeper. You become silent, to speak with meaning. You stop being accessible to everyone, so you can become profoundly available to the few things that truly matter: your purpose, your peace, your growth, your truth. You are no longer a constant presence in everyone's world. You are a quiet force in your own. This is what it means to be free, to no longer need the world's approval because you've found something greater: self-integration, wholeness, stillness. You no longer live to be seen. You live to see, to experience, to witness, to create, from your own center. So, when you stop being accessible to everyone, you are not closing your heart. You are closing the noise so the heart can finally be heard. You are not disappearing. You are becoming visible to yourself again. You are not losing connection. You are deepening it by aligning it with truth. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that journey begins with a single decision: to stop offering your energy to everything that isn't aligned with your becoming. When you do, something miraculous happens. The world slows down, your mind quiets, your soul breathes again, and you realize you were never meant to be constantly reachable. You were meant to be real. That's where freedom begins, not when everyone can reach you, but when you can finally reach yourself. So, take your time, step back, disconnect, not to escape, but to return. Because only when you stop being accessible to everyone will you finally discover the one presence you were always searching for, your own. If this message spoke to something within you, subscribe, not just to this channel, but to your own journey of awakening. More reflections like this await you here.